A discovery in the archives can be exciting, but I'm here to tell you that it can also be risky. I want to share with you a discovery that humbled me in the archives. In the spring of 2015, I was invited to participate in a small conference organized at Yale by the Art History and the South Asia programs to assess the collection of South Asian photography at the Beinecke. Historians, art historians, and practicing photographers gave public presentations on global photography and reviewed the Beinecke's holdings in guided sessions. But as I wandered into the Beinecke's digital collection on my own, I chanced upon a cache of over 100 large format photographs that stopped me in my tracks. These are the photographs. They are dazzling. The metadata mentioned that the photographer was Carl Van Vechten and the subject was a dancer from India named Ram Gopal. The discovery challenged my expertise. I had never heard of either the American photographer or the Indian dancer at that time. Also, given the context of the Yale conference, I assumed that these images were taken in India and was surprised to learn that they were all taken in Van Vechten's apartment on the Upper West Side in New York City in the spring of 1938. The final clinker was that no one in the conference knew of the existence of these images. The photographs remained unknown in part because they do not appear under South Asian photography, but under the Yale collection of American literature, and are a small part of the extensive Van Vechten papers in the Beinecke. My ongoing sense of fascination with this chance discovery led me to other archives in the US and in India, and now a book manuscript is under review at a press. Today, I will not dwell on Van Vechten much since we have learned so much about the great collections Van Vechten built in the Beinecke in many previous Mondays. I will only point to some aspects of his photography that are highlighted by the Indian dancer. The photographs at the Beinecke carry valuable information in Van Vechten's own hand, including a date and a negative number. The information helped me arrange Ram Gopal's photographs in a sequence and imagine the photo shoot shot by shot over a period of 3 days on April 21st, May the 5th, and May the 11th, 1938. A small diary Van Vechten maintained of his photo shoots also gave me a glimpse of a personal system he used to organize his subjects. The categories are troubling. They indicate a privileged white American photographer's gaze on his racialized subjects. His entry for Ram Gopal mentions he was struck by the gold costumes and jodhpurs of the exotic dancer. The story of Van Vechten's cross-cultural reach, however, becomes complicated when we explore how Ram Gopal came in contact with the American photographer in the first place, and exactly what unfolded during the 3-day photo shoot. Here is that story. In the spring of 1938, as a young dancer from Bangalore, Ram Gopal visited New York on a concert tour. He was trained in various forms of Indian classical dance and mastered the South Indian narrative style called the Kathakali. In Van Vechten's studio, we see him wearing the Kathakali crown as well as the costume of a North Indian form called Kathak. Today, Ram Gopal is considered a pioneer of Indian classical dance. In the 1930s, he participated in a pan-Indian movement to revive and reform old traditional practices for a newly educated urban public. By mid-20th century, after India's political independence from the British rule, Indian classical dance became a national heritage whose authenticity was traced to the sacred arts of ancient Hindu temples. In 1946, Ram Gopal literally gives the heritage idea a photographic form by posing against a South Indian temple and using his images for publications on Indian classical dance. The significance of Van Vechten's photographs for the early history of Indian dance cannot be underestimated. They are literally the first visual record of a pioneering figure. And they contain a stunning revelation. They show Ram Gopal not only representing Indian dance forms, but also freely interpreting his training, using costumes, ornaments, and veils that cannot be traced to any known traditions in India. What led him to this experiment? A few months prior to his New York trip back in Bangalore, Ram Gopal came in contact with an American dancer named La Mary, who was known for her choreography based on various world traditions she branded as ethnic dances. Ram Gopal taught La Mary the Kathakali and joined her company's tour to Southeast Asia, and Japan. In a photograph at the New York Public Library, we see the two dancers posing against a temple in Java. The gorgeous costumes are newly designed for them during their visit. They fit La Mary's program of ethnic dances and reflect what Matthew Cohen has called Javanese Orientalism, referring to the imaginary recreations of Java in cultural forms such as Hollywood films. Ram Gopal displays his Javanese costumes in Van Vechten's studio. His visual representations complicate the authenticity of Indian classical dance. They show Indian dance to be a modern invention, developing in conversation with the global trends of Orientalism in early 20th century. Ram Gopal and La Mary parted company in Tokyo, and the dancer traveled to Los Angeles, accompanied by a Polish writer and journalist he met in Tokyo named Alexander Yanta. The Los Angeles Times announces Yanta as the dancer's Polish manager. Van Vechten's photographs indicate that he was more than the dancer's manager. In Los Angeles, the two men head straight for Hollywood, armed with a letter from the American ambassador in Tokyo to the film director Cecil B. DeMille. And they also come in contact with other celebrities, including many who were Van Vechten's friends. A concert is arranged for Ram Gopal in Los Angeles, sponsored by a long list of those Hollywood celebrities. The composer Arthur Rubinstein helps in organizing a gig for the dancer at the 46th Street Theater in New York on May 1st, 1938. And I'm showing Carl Van Vechten's photographs of all these other people to just indicate the kind of network of friends in which Ram Gopal enters in 1938. Ram Gopal meets Van Vechten around his concert, most probably introduced to him by Mercedes de Acosta, a scriptwriter whom Ram Gopal met in Hollywood. De Acosta was in New York with the dancer and then accompanied him to Paris, where she introduced the dancer to the poet Gertrude Stein on Van Vechten's recommendation. Ram Gopal is welcomed into a network of Van Vechten's personal friends in New York. A page from an album shows the dancer in photographs embossed with the name E.G. Robeson, who is most probably Islanda Good Robeson, the anthropologist and photographer wife of the African-American actor and political activist, Paul Robeson. Such documents of Ram Gopal's informal appearance in Van Vechten's social circle highlights an important aspect of Van Vechten's photography also, namely, that it starts with personal friendships when his celebrity subjects are invited into his apartment for a photo shoot. When Van Vechten purchased a German Leica camera in 1932, he converted his apartment into a makeshift studio. A photograph taken in 1942 by Emily Danielson shows how he converted his living room into a studio space. The heavy curtain, you see it right here, the heavy curtain hanging on the right of the sofa could be pulled across the room to block the daylight from the windows. Then, A model could take a pose on the sofa, illuminated by studio light. And you can see the tiger skin in some of the photographs. Or the door panel from the Victorian cabinet on the right could be opened to serve as a background for the models. Van Vechten added other fabric curtains to this basic setup, and his models contributed a range of costumes to the photo shoot. In other words, Van Vechten's studio became a private space for all participants to jam together, and his celebrity subjects took on fantastical roles, wore risque costumes, and even posed nude in a way that could be troubling for their public image. The informality and hospitality of Van Vechten's photography was a major discovery for me in the archives. While we can equally explore Van Vechten's photographic collaboration with other men and women, black and white, nowhere is the intimacy of his photo studio visible as clearly as in the images of the Indian dancer. This is not because Van Vechten's photo shoot with Ram Gopal was unique in any way, but because his other images are stained by our troubled sense of interracial dynamics in the 21st century. And here, it is useful to turn to the historical archives and examine more closely what unfolds between the photographer and his subjects during his photo shoots. Let's hear the conversations occurring in real time between the Indian dancer and the American photographer. For instance, when Ram Gopal lifts up his hands to frame his eyes, Van Vechten shoots a close-up and writes in the back of the image that, according to the dancer, the gesture means, "I have beautiful eyes." Van Vechten pulls his Leica closer and closer to attend to these gestures and foot positions that intrigue him. And the series of images reveal a full-blown lecture demonstration by Ram Gopal on Indian dance. During this cross-cultural exchange and conversation, something also gets lost in translation. A few days after the photo shoot, while Ram Gopal was still in New York, Van Vechten sends him a picture postcard, writing in the back, I quote, "As a photograph, I think this is my favorite," unquote. The cropped overexposed image is not exactly flattering to the dancer. Other full views might have served better. What was Van Vechten thinking? To Van Vechten's credit, his comment makes one thing clear. This is not a conversation about dance, but about photography. His point is to demonstrate what his Leica camera can do. For this particular image, Van Vechten would have taken the Leica off the tripod and crouched on his knees right in front of the dancer, showing what its famed precision lens captures when the camera is brought handheld as close to the subject as it can go. Van Vechten was fascinated by the handheld camera, its precision lens, as well as its promise of not only helping photographers take better pictures, but also make them using creativity inside studios and kitchen sink darkrooms. Van Vechten's wife, Fania Marinoff, flatters Van Vechten's ambitions in a long poem she wrote on his 68th birthday in 1948. And I'm quoting the passages that are relevant here from that long poem. "From the depths of your dark room, where you toil hours and hours, your hands in strange liquids and with mysterious powers, with the lens of your Leica, you create and give birth to beauty a Stieglitz or Steichen would deem of great worth," unquote. As the poem indicates, Van Vechten looked over the shoulders of professional photographers, armed with what he has called the mystical paraphernalia of the Leica. He deliberately stages a call and response with their imagery, often with a light touch of humor and parody Marinoff captures in her poem. In his favorite image of Ram Gopal, Van Vechten demonstrates the transformative power of the Leica. Notice that the low angle view makes the dancer look monumental. The cropped image transforms him in one more significant way. It makes him appear like a fragment of ancient sculpture placed on a museum pedestal. Van Vechten often compared human bodies to artworks in this way. He borrowed this interest in juxtaposing human bodies, faces with sculptures from the modernist experiments of professional photographers. These modernist experiments are troubling to my eyes. I have been trained since the 1990s to observe the role of photography in the Western domination of Asian and African countries, and to critique the structural racism of cultural practices in the US and elsewhere in the world. So post-colonial studies, critical race studies, ethnic studies, Black feminism, I've been sort of soaking all that up and coming to the archive with that. But here, the archives ask me to put my politics on hold and examine the documents themselves more carefully. 2 points become evident in the archives. One, the play between a performer's body and an artwork would have pleased the dancer. In the 1940s, Ram Gopal had also related his performance to the stone monuments of ancient India, as we saw earlier. Second, and more importantly, Van Vechten's apartment studio was fundamentally a private space for collaborative fantasy making, to which Ram Gopal brought his own share of cross-cultural fantasies. We feel the risk of such a private sport when we see Ram Gopal, Van Vechten, and the Polish journalist Alexander Janta we met earlier, taking turns in front of the camera, horsing around, not without homoerotic innuendos. Janta also poses as a multi-armed Hindu god with additional arms provided by the Indian dancer hiding behind the curtain. The risk of such a private sport becomes evident in a letter Janta wrote a few months later to Van Vechten, who had sent a few photographs earlier to his family estate in Poland where Ram Gopal was visiting. Janta proposes a book based on those photographs. However, in sifting through the images, he becomes concerned. The photographs he calls sitting whale poses cannot be included in the book. Using Van Vechten's negative numbers, he suggests destroying them. Clearly, they crossed a line between what was a private sport and needed to stay that way, and the public image of the Indian dancer Janta was wishing to create through the publication. Probably the risk of the New York photo shoot was too great for all the participants. Beyond 1938, the evidence of the exchanges between Ram Gopal and Van Vechten is sparse. Ram Gopal never mentions the photo shoot in his autobiography published in 1957, and Van Vechten soon forgets Ram Gopal's name. And yet, as a final treat, please squint at the photograph of Van Vechten's living room from 1942 and notice Ram Gopal in a set of 3 photographs displayed along with a Rococo mirror on the windowsill behind the sofa. So right to the left of the Rococo, you see the photograph of Ram Gopal in this dance pose. To his left is a lion cub pet of the Hollywood actress Tallulah Bankhead titled Winston Churchill Jr. And then you have on the other side Alicia Markova in the ballerina in the posing as Giselle. Clearly, Van Vechten cherished the Indian dancer at least for a few more years in beyond 1938. Meanwhile, I hope the extensive archive, the record I have built from the photo shoot itself, convinces us that the brief encounter between Ram Gopal and Van Vechten was transformative for both. Thank you very much.